I know that there's a warning for people against people who point their finger at God. It's you can find that theme throughout the pages of the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. You know, presuming on the grace of God and questioning God's judgment, questioning His decision processes, questioning God's fairness. It's all dealt with in all the books, 66 books of the Bible. Even God's prophets themselves at times questioned God's justice and fairness. And they finally were straightened out as far as it was just their faulty perception. They just weren't able to understand it from their perspective, because their ways weren't God's ways. You know, He's divinity and people aren't. But yeah, and the Apostle Paul says that who are you, O man? Shall the thing formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me this way? In other words, you know, if we are just products of a creator, you know, if we were made from clay, from the dust of the earth, then we really don't have a whole lot of authority as human beings, as God's creation. God is the sole governor. He's the sole judge. He's the total. He's basically an authoritarian. Basically a dictator. But what's really weird about it is perhaps that's why he's not really a dictator. Because of the fact that he's given man free will, free choice. God has done that. God could have dealt with humanity thousands of years ago. You know, He could have just completely brought total wrath and destruction upon the whole world and the universe. But He didn't. He restrained. It says that God is perfectly patient. He's long-suffering, which means He's not quick on it when it comes to judgment and giving people what they deserve. But He's reserved. He's patient. That's what long-suffering means. It means that He's slow to wrath. He bears with people for long periods, ages, generations, decades, centuries. He tolerates them. And, you know, I know that's a big issue, especially today with certain members of society. They talk about being tolerant, especially coming from the LGBT community. They talk about this thing called tolerance, you know, universal love, peace, happiness, mutual respect. And they talk about all these things. But, you know, God is actually the perfect example of all that, because God has allowed man to continue on in foolishness for thousands of years. I mean, look at man's great accomplishments in their building structures, their architecture, their arts, and their knowledge, their learning, their academics, all that. Yeah, that's admirable. That's wonderful. But God gave all those abilities as gifts. He created us with creative power. You know, God is a creator, so he created mankind with creative abilities, because those are His characteristics. And it says plainly that we exhibit those characteristics because we're made in God's image. We're made in His image. we possess the feelings, we possess the knowledge, we possess the ability to, we have those traits, those attributes from God that he bestowed upon us. That's why he said, let us make man in our own image. In fact, we are made in God's image. But the thing is he's placed limitations on his creation. We can only go so far before we reach the limit, the threshold, because of our humanity. We're not divine. We're divine maybe at the spiritual level, in that our souls, our spirits are indestructible. The real us is indestructible. We continue on in eternity. We're stuck in these bodies, but we continue to exist even after these bodies are decayed and rotten and deceased. We'll continue living on. So at least that's what the ancients tell us. But yeah, as far as but he does talk about a judgment that he oftentimes delays because of his mercy and his wanting to be fair in his judicial process. He's fair, so he holds back. He restrains himself from giving us what we deserve. That's the part of his mercy side, his mercy qualities. But he does have a sternness about him, and the apostles make mention of that. There is a sternness side to it, where he does give out justice and rulings, and gives out, like a court of law. But God is good.